The Cathedral Church of St Marie is built in the Gothic Revival style and largely modelled on the 14th century Church of St Andrews, Eckington, in Lincolnshire. It opened in 1850 at the end of 3 centuries of legal suppression of Catholicism in England and became a cathedral in 1980 when the Diocese of Hallam was created to serve the Catholics of South Yorkshire, parts of Derbyshire and the district of Bassetlaw. St Marie's architect was Matthew Ellison Hadfield, whose name lives on in the Sheffield firm of architects Hadfield Corkwell Davidson. Hadfield was born a Catholic in 1812, the grandson of the Duke of Norfolk's agent in Glossop, Matthew Ellison. Aged 15, he began working for his uncle Michael, the Duke's agent in Sheffield, before joining Doncaster architects Woodhead and Hurst, and then moving to London to work with P.F. Robinson, one of the founder members of the Institute of Architecture. Hadfield learnt about the styles of the Gothic Revival working on Robinson's scheme for rebuilding the Houses of Parliament, which had burnt down in 1834. Hadfield returned to Sheffield to join forces with John Gray Waitman, who had also worked at Woodhead and Hurst. The pair's earliest surviving project was the construction of the monument to 402 victims in Sheffield of the 1832 cholera epidemic, and their earliest known building was the Catholic Church of All Saints in Glossop, which opened for worship in 1836. Hadfield headed the ceremony of laying the first stone for St Marie's on the 25th of March 1847. Construction was completed in 1850 at a cost of £10,560, or around 1.46 million in today's money. Hadfield and members of his family were significant donors towards the development of the cathedral. The window above the north door, which shows the Virgin Mary and King Henry, who became the Holy Roman Emperor in 10,002, was given to the church by Henry Taylor Bulmer, who we will meet later, and was the artist who designed the roof, rood cross and now removed screen in St Marie's, which separated the sanctuary from the rest of the church. The dedication beneath the window reads, "Good Christian people of your charity, pray for ye eternal rest of ye soul of Sarah, ye beloved mother of Henry Taylor Bulmer, who died at Kingston upon Hull, June the 16th, 1843, aged 64 years. Pray likewise for the soul's rest of Henry Taylor Bulmer, sometime artist of Sheffield, who caused this window to be made and died December the 6th, 1857, aged 46 years. Among the Hadfield's donations was the reredos behind the altar in the mortuary chapel, dedicated to the memory of Edward Bruce, who was a young assistant in their architectural practice when it was drawing up the plans for the cathedral, but died in 1848, 2 years before the cathedral opened. The reredos was carved by Johann Petz, who was born in the Austrian Tyrol in 1818, the son of a border guard. Petz worked for his family as a shepherd, but ran away to study sculpture and drawing with Augustin Scharmer in Wildmeermingen. He went on to Munich, where he studied with Conrad Eberhard and then enrolled in the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, established by King Maximilian I of Bavaria, before eventually setting up his own sculpture workshop in Munich. Most of his work was for church clients in Bavaria and northeastern Austria. His relief showing the Last Supper, carved in 1859, can be found in Munich's Frauenkirche, the Cathedral of Our Dear Lady, which is the seat of the Archbishop of Munich and Freising. Johann Petz also carved the limewood statue of the Madonna and Child in the shrine in the north transept, designed by Matthew Ellison Hadfield's son, Charles Hadfield. Charles was born in 1840 and joined his father's architectural practice in 1864. A mosaic dedicated to St. Anthony of Padua on a pillar at the west end of the nave commemorates Charles's charitable work with the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Charles Hadfield designed the Sacred Heart Shrine in the north transept, as well as the Virgin and Child Shrine, and the Alabaster Pieta in the same transept, which commemorates his father's life. The painting and decoration of the Virgin and Child and Sacred Heart shrines was carried out by Lavers, Barraud and Westlake, a London firm best known for its stained glass, examples of which can also be found in St. Mary's. It was the third member of that partnership, Nathaniel Westlake, who in 1874 painted the images of St. Winifred, St. John the Evangelist, St. Dominic and St. Catherine, the patroness of Sheffield, on the panels of the Virgin and Child shrine. 3 years later, Westlake went on to paint the portraits of Blessed Margaret Mary Alacoque and St. Jane Frances de Chantal, and the angels with censers for side panels of the Sacred Heart shrine. The Yorkshire-born sculptor Richard Lockwood Bolton is credited with producing the marble work and statue of Christ for the Charles Hadfield designed Sacred Heart shrine, in addition to the marble work for St. Mary's Lady Chapel. Charles Hadfield also designed Cathedral House, and you can find a carving of his head on the last arch of Cathedral House's ground floor bay window. Both the Pieta in the north transept and the statues that adorn Charles Hadfield's Cathedral House were carved by Frank Torrey, who set up a studio in Sheffield in 1887 and also taught at Sheffield School of Art. By the 1920s, Torrey had moved his studio to premises on Ecclesall Road, which are now occupied by the Porter Brook Public House. Torrey's firm ceased operating in the 1950s, but examples of his work can still be seen on Sheffield City Hall, Sheffield City Library, Parade Chambers on High Street, the exterior of Carmel House in Fargate, the White Building in Fitzallen Square, the top of the Victoria Methodist Church Tower, and St. John's Church in Ranmore. The hammer-beam roof of St. Mary's Sanctuary depicts angels celebrating Mass in heaven, mirroring the actions of the priest below. Its design, together with the rood cross above the altar and the rood screen, which was removed in 1970 following the reforms introduced by Vatican II, are attributed to Henry Taylor Bulmer, the Yorkshire-born Catholic artist who spent the latter part of his life in Sheffield and died in the city in 1857 at the age of 46. Bulmer was responsible for the original interior decorations of the Immaculate Conception in Farm Street, London, one of the major Catholic buildings of the Gothic Revival. He was also responsible for the decoration of St Barnabas's Church in Pimlico, St John's Cathedral in Salford, St Mary's Church, Blackbrook, St Helens, and the English Architectural Court at the Crystal Palace, Sydenham. Bulmer's designs for the sanctuary were executed by Sheffield woodcarver, portrait photographer and teacher Arthur Hayball, who was the son of Thomas Hayball, the joiner and builder who won the contract for all the carpentry in St Mary's. Arthur taught himself to carve while convalescing after breaking his leg. He trained and taught at the Sheffield School of Design, later known as the School of Art. He became Master of Wood Carving at the school in 1875 and held the post until his death in 1887, when he was succeeded by Frank Torrey, who we have already met. Arthur Hayball won a gold medal at the Great Exhibition for an 8-foot-high, 4-foot-wide walnut cabinet made in the Italian style to his own design. His youngest daughter, Clara, became a skilled carver and married William Keeling, the Sheffield landscape painter who worked in oils and watercolours. The sanctuary is dominated by the Great East Window, donated by the cathedral's architect Matthew Ellison Hadfield, who can be seen at prayer with his wife Sarah beneath the Book of Revelation's vision of the Virgin Mary clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, crowned with a halo of 12 stars. The window was made by Newcastle-born William Wales and designed by George Goldie, whose mother, Mary Ann, was the daughter of the sculptor, artist, Egyptologist and museum curator Joseph Bonomi. While Goldie was studying at Ushaw, the Roman Catholic College in County Durham, he became friends with Augustus Welby Pugin, the architect, designer and artist who pioneered work in the Gothic Revival style of architecture and was working on the chapel at Ushaw. Pugin, a close friend of Charles Hadfield, told Goldie that if he wanted to become an architect, he should study with Hadfield's architectural practice. Goldie joined the firm in 1845, became a partner and continued to work with Hadfield until 1860, setting up a London office and then becoming the sole practitioner there. To the left of the window stands the tomb and memorial to Father Charles Pratt, the priest who conceived St Mary's. The tomb is one of several works of the well-known ecclesiastical sculptor Thomas Earp to grace the cathedral. Earp was born in Nottingham and is best known for carving the Eleanor Cross, which stands outside London's Charing Cross station. He modelled and partly made the effigy for Father Pratt's tomb while working in London for the building contractor George Myers. Earp left Myers to set up his own architectural sculpture practice the year after work on St Mary's was completed. In 1874 he realised Charles Hadfield's designs for the shrine for the statue of the Blessed Virgin and Child, which now stands in St Mary's north transept. 3 years after that, Earp went on to provide the woodwork for St Mary's Sacred Heart Shrine, and a year after that carried out the stone and wood carving for St Mary's Lady Chapel. It was Earp's apprentice, James Erskine Knox, who carved the case of the nearby organ, made from Austrian oak, to the designs of John Francis Bentley, the Doncaster-born Victorian architect who is best known for designing Westminster Cathedral. St Marie's organ is one of only 3 made by Thomas Christopher Lewis that remains tonally unaltered, and is not only the largest and most impressive of the 3, but also the only one on daily public view, and the only one that is easily accessible. One of the other tonally unaltered organs was built in the same year as St Marie's and is at Studley Royal in the grounds of Fountains Abbey. Lewis trained as an architect and launched his own practice in 1863, but probably started building organs about 3 years earlier, becoming one of the leading organ builders in the 19th century. In 1875 he was commissioned to build St Marie's Lewis Tracker organ, which has 1,500 pipes ranging in size from ½ an inch to 16 feet in height, 3 manuals or keyboards and 24 stops. The organ cost £1,095 in 1875, or about £129,600 in today's money, but it is worth far more than that. In 1988 it had an estimated value of £180,000 to £200,000, and the value has more than doubled since then. A recent rebuild of the organ, following the major renovation of the cathedral in 2012, has overcome a miscalculation made by Lewis, which meant excessive wind resistance in valves controlled directly by the organist's fingers made the organ difficult to play. No original material has been lost following the renovation, so the organ could always be returned to its original state. Immediately below the east window is the reredos for the original high altar, which was replaced by a new memorial altar following the First World War. Both the original altar and reredos were designed by Augustus Welby Pugin and carved by the Belgian sculptor Theodore Jean-Baptiste Phyffers. Phyffers was recruited by Pugin to carve models and guide workers making wood carvings for the new Houses of Parliament in London. The reredos panels show 8 angels bearing instruments and emblems of the Passion: the cross, the crown of thorns, nails and a hammer, pincers, a ladder, a spear, the garments stripped from Jesus for which lots were cast, the depiction of the 5 wounds of Christ, whips and a whipping post. Phyffers also carved the reredos in the St Joseph's Chapel. The carvings at the top of the reredos show Joseph on his deathbed with Christ poised to welcome him into heaven. Panels on either side show the archangels Michael and Gabriel. The central figure beneath the deathbed scene is St Joseph holding a lily, a traditional symbol of purity and rebirth, which may also be used to signify virginity. Phyffers' work can be found in the cathedrals of Carlisle, Limerick, Canterbury and Antwerp, as well as St Marie's. The main window in the south transept was, like the great east window and a number of other windows in St Marie's when it opened, made by William Wales. Wales was born in 1808 and started out as a grocer and tea merchant, but also established a kiln in the backyard of his premises, where he made small decorative enamels which he sold in his shop. He studied stained glass design in Munich in the 1830s and set up his own studio to design and manufacture stained glass in 1838. Wales produced stained glass for Augustus Welby Pugin, and most of his work can be found in churches in the north of England, including Hexham Abbey in Northumberland. His stained glass can also be found in Chichester and Gloucester cathedrals and the First Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. The windows on the spiral staircase from the south transept to the Lady Chapel were designed by John Francis Bentley, who also designed the case of the Lewis organ. They were made by Lavers, Barrard and Westlake, who worked on the shrines in St Mary's north transept. The first window on the staircase depicting the Annunciation is dedicated to Carolina Bernasconi, while the window depicting St Joseph further up is dedicated to the memory of Charles and Constance Rimondi. Charles and Constance's daughter, Emily Angelina, was Charles Hadfield's wife, while Carolina Bernasconi was the third child of Louis Bernasconi and Charles and Constance's eldest daughter, Savina. In 1879, Bentley became one of the founders of the Guild of St George and St Luke, which was set up to raise the standards of art in Catholic churches. Bentley, along with Charles Hadfield and Nathaniel Westlake, were close friends of Augustus Welby Pugin, who we have already met and who designed St Mary's Great West Window. The Great West Window is known as a typological window because it links events from the Bible's Old Testament with events during the life of Christ, recorded in the New Testament. The main panels of St Mary's West Window are arranged in pairs, with Old Testament events to the left of their New Testament fulfilment on the right. The three rows of main panels are separated by rows of heads representing unidentified prophets and patriarchs, while the curvilinear tracery, the stonework in the apex above the main part of the window, contains an image of the Virgin and Child at the top, together with personifications of peace crowned and carrying the bread and wine of the Eucharist, and justice blindfolded and carrying the tablets of law. The tracery also includes images of 4 angels, the lower 2 of whom bear banners bearing 2 lines in Latin which appear in a number of prayers to the Virgin Mary. The window was made by Hardman & Co., which was founded in Birmingham's Handsworth district in 1838. Hardman began making stained glass in 1844 and became one of the world's leading manufacturers of stained glass and ecclesiastical fittings. We hope you have enjoyed this video on the Cathedral Church of St Marie. You can find more information about the artworks in St Marie's and details of other tours in the Visit Us section of the St Marie's website.